Good morning.
Must be 11 o'clock.
Happy Friday, everybody. So, what's going on? How's everybody doing?
Hey, Paul.
Hey there.
Okay, so once again, we have Facebooks going, we have Zooms going. Getting good at this.
We're getting going.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about language, and more importantly, the
what?
oh my gosh, I've lost the act of mind reading and then believing our own mind reads. You're gonna have to go ahead because I'm coughing. Oh, he's leaving, I'm coughing. Not going so well yet. So now more than ever, we've stressed to you the importance of language, and because we're all in this unusual situation, we have been working with clients who have expressed to us the difficulties, many of them, and one of them is this transition to texting even more than people were texting before, and relying on one tiny aspect of communication to be the full range of communication right now with their with people in their lives.
Before you jump in, why don't I do a review?
Okay.
Okay.
I was going to do a review now.
Yeah. Tara likes to get into it really quickly. One of the things we shared early, and we have a fourth step to share, is how to manage our emotional state. So 4 tools for helping you manage your emotional state. The first tool was called a break state. It interrupts your pattern of behavior. And if you're in a negative emotional state, using a break state breaks that negative emotional state and puts you in ostensibly a neutral state. It may actually be a little bit confusing when you go from a highly negative state to a neutral state instantly. Maybe a little confusing how you made that jump, but it does it every time. Now, there are a number of break states. The key to breaking states is changing the modality that you're in, from kinesthetic to auditory or visual. And the best jump to do is from kinesthetic to visual. Now, the best way to get a jump from a kinesthetic state into a visual state is to look up. So if you or somebody else you know is in a negative emotional state, have them look up. Seriously, look up. Yeah, thank you. And as they look up, have them see their mobile telephone number or their home telephone number on a billboard. And ask them, what does their billboard look like? What are the colors of the letters? What are the colors of the background? And they'll describe that to you. Now they're in their visual imagination, because they're making it up, and they're in their recall of their telephone number. So they're using cognitive functions, and this moves them quickly from a kinesthetic state into a visual state, thinking with their minds, not being emotional. And when they do that, so if everybody did that right now real quickly, just look up, see your mobile telephone number, look up, Tara, see it, and you guys can send, those of you who are on Zoom or on Facebook, you can send us the color of your letters and your background. I get a giggle reading them. And then you can even embellish it. Some people will have them flashing, some people will have them in neon, and then read the numbers backwards. Now, normally it only takes the last 4 backwards to break the state, but if you want to try, just read all 10 numbers in your telephone number backwards. Now that breaks the emotional state. Now, if you want to get really calm, we encourage you to stay looking up, focus on a point ahead of you, and go into peripheral vision. Now, peripheral vision is staring at a spot up and ahead of you, which, when you do that, as you stare at that spot, you can start to notice everything else come into focus. Now, as you get everything else into focus, you can start hearing sounds all around you, above you, behind you, beside you, in front of you. And as you stare at that spot, you see everything, you hear everything around you, you'll start to notice your feelings, the room temperature, the clothes you're wearing, the fabric of the cushion seat you're on, whatever you're experiencing. And as you start to notice all the feelings around you, notice your breathing. Your breathing rate will go down. Your breathing rate will start to go down, and you can be aware of it, and your breathing will drop from your chest to your diaphragm. So the first step is the break state. The second state is to use peripheral vision. Now you're in a very calm, neutral state. You're in the now. You know, Eckhart Tolle calls this being in the now. And now that you're in the now calm, you can move to a very positive emotional state by using an anchor. Of course, those of you who have been trained in NLP know what an anchor is. Those of you who are new to us, on session 2 or session 3, I actually did an anchoring session with everybody online. But you fire your anchor, which is neurologically linked to positive emotional states. And now you've gone from a negative emotional state to a calm state to the peripheral vision state, and now moved into a highly positive state. Now, you can do this anytime you're feeling negative emotions. I'd also encourage you to learn a breathing technique. Now, there's lots and lots and lots of TED Talks about the power of breathing. I'm a fan of Wim Hof, W-I-M-H-O-F. He's a Dutchman. He's all over the internet, but if you want to see the research on his breathing technique and his exposure to cold technique, research Wim Hof, Wayne, like the name Wayne, state research. Because in these times of COVID-19, he has actually demonstrated the ability to stimulate our immune systems through his breathing technique and his exposure to the cold. And I think that's a positive thing to do. The breathing state is also deeply, his breathing technique is also deeply relaxing, and it oxygenates your body in a way that so much of us who sit behind a desk no longer do. We compress our diaphragm and we're not getting enough oxygen through our body. So the 4th step then is to learn a breathing technique that helps your immune system and helps oxygenate you. And I highly recommend Wim Hof. You can, if you go on YouTube, you can get a Wim Hof guided breathing. It's 3 rounds of breathing. It's about 11 minutes long. Do it daily. You'll be amazed at the difference. And read about him. Read his research. Read the research from Europe and from Wayne State. So that's our 4 emotional state management tools. Do those daily. Do those twice a day, and do them whenever you feel yourself going into a negative state. And have fun with it. Those of you who weren't on the session, I actually, our son had a cut on his forearm that I had to put a Band-Aid on. He was starting to get agitated. I broke his state with his mom's telephone number up on a billboard. We have bunnies at home, so he had bunnies all over the billboard. It was kind of fun. There you go. I'm going to deal with a technical issue while Tara starts into this session.
All right. So language is what we were going to talk to you about today. So we have some numbers, and I don't know where the numbers came from, and you know, I wouldn't take them as gospel, but certainly there's an indication that words are about 7% of the meaning of communication. So 7% of how we receive communication is actually the words, everything else that we receive in our communication. So the other 90 or so percent is actually coming to us through things like tone, context, intonation, the physiology that comes with the delivery of the words. Those are all much more important to us than the actual words that you hear. And so this is relevant today because of our need right now to use text and other forms of communication. Even video, it does give us some more elements than text and email does, but it still leaves out an element of being one-on-one and a lot of that communication. And so what we need to watch out for is allowing ourselves to mind read the meaning or the intention of somebody else's communication. So what very often happens, and so a lot of NLP work is in demystifying a lot of the meaning that we end up believing ourselves as if it's truth. So if you don't pay attention, what can often happen is that a message comes to you, a communication comes to you, and you immediately make a bunch of associations in your mind about what the intention of the other person was, what they might have been thinking, why they said what they said, how they want you to receive it, you know, all of those different things, not realizing necessarily that you're just making that up. It's just a fiction. I mean, your best guess is that this might be of the many, many things, and almost certainly, almost assuredly, you're not going to be right. You may be partially right. You may have reason to, enough information to know that that there's a lot of truth to what you've created in your mind, but you're not going to be wholly accurate. And in a time like this, when we rely so much on words, texting and emails and other ways of communicating, even phone calls and things, we have to be very, very careful of the thoughts that we start to believe ourselves. Do you want to add anything there?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So here's a fun way to think about it. This is something I heard Brene Brown talk about. It may be in her literature as well, but I heard her interviewed, and she brought up this really interesting point, that somebody says something, and Al and I have talked to you about the communication model. You have 2 million bits of information coming in. We have the ability to process about 134 of those.
Because of through filters, we delete most of it, we distort some of it, we generalize the rest of it.
So based on that very, very, very limited amount of actual information that we're processing, knowing that so much of it is deleted, distorted, and generalized, we come up with a conclusion about the meaning of that engagement, those words, the communication, whatever it is.
So if you sit here now, the 134 bits per second you're receiving through your filters is different than Tara's 134 bits per second or my 134 bits per second. Each of you are receiving, out of the possible 2 million bits per second, you're receiving and retaining a different 134 bits per second. And that's why everybody's experience of the same event or the same circumstance is always different. In NLP, we call that the map. Our map is not the territory. Our map is not the real experience. My map is the information I allowed myself to take in through my filters.
So here's a fun way to think about it. If somebody has limited information, so if somebody has some data here and some information here and some, bits and pieces of things, and then they put it together and all of the missing things, so all of the information that is unavailable. So again, if you think about the communication model, how much of that is actually unavailable to us? And we fill those voids, those missing parts, with our own beliefs and our own values and our own understandings and our own experience. You know what you call that? You call that a conspiracy theory. Take a minute, think about it. It's what a conspiracy theory is, right? And yet it's how we navigate. It's how we all orient ourselves every single day. We create these conspiracy theories based on the very limited information that comes through our filters. And then we believe those conspiracy theories so often as if they're truth.
Our own personal conspiracy theories about the world we live in. Why the world is the way the world is.
So when you happen to have a core belief, a really strong belief, it takes up more of the filter. It's more likely to be the color that you're seeing things through. So the conspiracy theory, I may tell myself, somebody gives me a funny look, right? So I walk into some space and somebody looks at me funny. I have very little information, only that this person, through their eyes, through the visual cues I can take, and, whatever the situation may be, I take that little bit of information. This person has looked at me funny.
If Tara's in a good mood, her filters, delete, distort, and generalize, will allow good information in. Oh, that person's in a bad state.
My belief is, I haven't done anything offensive or rude to that person. They must be having a really bad day. Right? And my compassion may take over. I may go ask them how they're doing. I may, whatever.
If Tara's in a bad state, her delete, distort, and generalization filters will be, or if she's feeling insecure when that person looks at her, she's going to let in information that corroborates her insecurities.
So now I'm believing, that person just, nobody likes me. People just have a bad feeling about me. Everywhere I go, people just aren't welcoming to me the way they are to others. Right? And now this piece of information is used by my mind, which has tricked me into believing this mind read, that it's actually affirming a belief. So now whatever my belief was, if my belief was, there's no reason for me to believe that I'm, that it has anything to do with me, or if my belief is this must be about me, in whatever way, I'm actually going to use this theory, this conspiracy theory, to affirm that belief. And now I'm even more convinced than ever that that belief is true. And imagine, as that happens throughout the day, experience after experience after experience, we are in fact affirming the beliefs that we have. And it's a tough thing to do, to actually step out of that and stay objective, right? The smartest thing for me to do in that case, so if it was somebody who looked at me funny, who's just a stranger, I'm best to just carry on. Let it go. Who cares what it means? Don't give it any meaning at all. Move on. It doesn't affect my life. But say that's, my mom or something, right? Say that's somebody close to me who I care about. Rather than mind reading and jumping to a conclusion, which is so easy to do when we're unaware, I would be best served to say to myself, I don't really know what that's about. And if I need to know, or if I have decided that it's relevant and important for me to know, I'm best to stay in this place of uncertainty and just accept that I don't have the information I need to understand what that was about, and go ask. Resist the temptation to come up with a certainty. We're going to talk about certainty next week and how it works neurologically. But avoid that temptation and instead keep yourself open and ask questions so that you can get as much data as possible, so that at least your balance of data versus your own, ideas, values, beliefs gets a little bit more reflective of what's really going on.
Now, Tara mentioned the outset here that 7% of our communication is the words we use. 38% is the emotional tonality of those words. 38% is the emotional tonality of those words. See little people going out behind us here. And 55% is our physiology. Not only the physiology of the person sending the message, but also the physiology of the person receiving the message. Now, in this time of COVID-19, if you're spending a lot of time on your mobile phone, looking in your mobile phone, scrolling, just look at the physiology you're in, the physical structure of your body. The more I watch people all the time on their phones, their shoulders are hunched in, their body is compressed, they're not able to breathe in their diaphragm. They are in a physiology of a negative emotional state. A positive emotional state, and we play this game all the time when we're teaching. We get the room to tell us how to sit as if we're in a negative emotional state, or if we're in a positive emotional state. Inevitably, when we get when directed into the negative emotional state, we're slumped, our hands, our heads are down. This is the posture that most people use when they're on their cell phone.
It's also the posture of sitting on your couch. It's also the posture of often sitting at your table. A lot of the situations that you're in now that you're quarantined at home reflect this physiology that really doesn't support a positive state of mind, a positive emotional state.
Correct. So, the thing about texting, now that, Tara was talking about messaging, it takes a gifted writer to get you to emote accurately when you read their work. That's why gifted writers are gifted writers.
One friend who can do it,
Jeffrey Lincoln. Most of us aren't, okay, even if we think we're gifted writers. And then when we're reading text or responding to text, the speed at which we do this prevents us from being great writers. So the words 7% at the other end are received, but as Tara said, they're interpreted. The person receiving these flat two-dimensional messages is allowed the privilege, sitting at home in a negative physiology, to receive and interpret them through mind reading what the message is. And messages can get so far off track so fast.
You know what's interesting is that the more you know the person, perhaps even the more you love the person, the more time you've spent with them. So most of you are quarantined with people, hopefully, with people you know fairly well.
Unless you're on a cruise ship.
Yeah. But what's amazing is that the more you know a person, the more experience and time you've spent with the person, the more likely you are to be mind reading instead of actually taking the objective reality of what's happening.
Yes.
It's not the other way, it's not the opposite way. So you actually are more likely to have an incorrect meaning of what the person's intention or whatever it was when you have spent a lot of time with them, because so much, you can imagine how this works, right? You have so many existing beliefs about that person or about how they operate, that those are just overwhelming to the words and what is actually happening. So just be really, really mindful of this. And I'm going to give you a great...
Let me just jump in. And the media, when you watch the media about anything, look at the balance of positive reporting versus negative reporting. look at the balance of projecting negative emotion, fear, actually, a lot of the media projects, versus the successes. And COVID-19 is a great example. I mean, in terms of virus control, the world is doing an extraordinary skill, an extraordinary process of shutting it down and reacting. And yet most of the reporting is very negative. And if you're getting negative messaging through a medium that's highly skilled at sending the message, those messages come in bright colors with perfect tonality and perfect language, and they're designed to make you emote. The messaging of the professionals is designed to make you emote. If you're in a negative physiology and you're receiving those messages, chances are they're going to have a far larger impact on you negatively than they should have if they were transmitted neutrally and you were in a positive physiology. So managing how you receive communication, your reaction to them is really important in this time and all the time.
Okay, so here's a way, a practical, very, very useful tool to use to be able to stop yourself from believing your own conspiracy theories. Okay, so this is based on, loosely based, but it's our adaptation of Byron Katie's 4 questions. So those of you...
And Byron Katie's questions are almost, they could fit like this into the NLP meta model, which was patterned off of Virginia Satir. And of course, Byron Katie is highly read and highly experienced, so her questions are really well formed.
So, the first thing you do when you notice a thought that is unwanted or negative, or any thought that you have, you can do this with. So you say to yourself, is it true? So if the thought is, you know, no one ever listens to me.
Is it true?
You say to yourself, is it true? And that right off the bat, you might say, well, actually, no, that's not true. Some people do listen to me and some people don't, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. You could interfere right there. Or you may find the answer is, well, it feels true. You know, it does feel true that no one listens to me, or whatever it is.
I've never heard of it.
So the next question you would ask yourself is, you say, well, is it absolutely true? Can I prove it? You're asking yourself the question, is it absolutely unquestionable that this is a truth? Can I prove that? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be no. Well, it's not absolutely true.
In the meta model, Virginia Satir and NLP people would have asked, are there any examples of when people have listened to you or do listen to you? So a similar question.
So, in response to that, what you're going to notice is that there are going to be exceptions. This is not an absolute truth. And what you want to ask yourself after that is, well, when I do believe this, so when I believe that nobody listens to me, how do I act in response to that? What do I do when I believe that to be a truth? How do I respond? How do I act? How do I behave? How do I feel? And once you notice that, you're going to notice some really specific things about yourself and your reactions that you may not have noticed before. And then you ask the question of yourself, how would I react if this wasn't true? How would I react then? So how would I react? So how do I react, backing up to 3? How do I react when I believe that no one listens to me? Well, I don't speak up anymore. I don't bother sharing my opinions because nobody's going to listen anyway. I've already decided that. And,
or you do with attitude.
Yeah, I get to, you know, I say it all bitchy and, you know, defensive. And
yeah.
I don't even, you know, the people that are listening to me probably aren't really, like, they're just pretending, or, you know, right? Like, you could have, it could just go on and we won't. Funny, as fun as that was, yeah. But that's how you respond. You notice that, right? So how would I react? How would I act if I didn't believe that, if that wasn't true? Well, I'd probably just share my opinions because I would believe people were listening. And I would share them in a way where it's easy to receive them, right? Like I would share them with like enthusiasm or excitement. I would
freely.
Yeah, I would assume that when people are listening to me that they're interested in what I'm saying. I would believe that I am interesting to hear it, right? So you.
Did you notice Tara's whole physiology shifted as soon as she talked about having been listened to as opposed to not being listened to. You could actually see it on her, even though she was just role playing in her own mind.
And so you ask yourself the question, so how can I solve this problem now? And if the answer isn't evident to you, if you don't recognize in that moment that, like, you know what is a heck of a lot better than not saying anything and feeling pissy and defensive and unhappy about it, is assuming that you can share your opinion, that you can, you know, again, we're using this one little example.
Yeah.
But the reality, your unconscious mind, we keep telling you, doesn't know the difference between real or imagined. And when your unconscious mind gets a reality check, basically, that like you've been assuming that this is true, but there is, and responding to it as if there is one path, right? Here's what happens. Here's my belief about it that is true. Here's how I react. End of story. If you break out of that, you're asking, you're just telling your mind is caught like this. It's saying this happens and this is my response, and we're locked in. That's the way it is. So what you're doing is you're saying, okay, this happens, but actually, you know, you could respond this way or this way or this way or this way. And there's been times when you've responded this way and got a different. And it's not, for your mind, the important part is just to realize that this is not the only way, that there are all these other options. What you do with it, who knows? You may need to, you know, work on it or practice it or, you know, whatever you need to do. But the important part is that your unconscious mind stops tricking you into believing that this is the only option.
And I've said several times over the last week and a half that we look outside the NLP community for hard science backing up why NLP works when it works so well. And what Tara's talking about here falls right in the realm of Lisa Feldman Barrett's work, where when somebody says nobody listens to me, their brain's predicting that nobody will listen to them in the future. Those 4 questions Tara just walked you through now open up the opportunity to possibilities. If you grab any of those possibilities and imagine yourself out in the future behaving differently, you're now influencing your mind's prediction of how you'll behave in the future. And it's a powerful skill set to do. Highly successful people always have behavioral flexibility. They have the most behavioral flexibility in every circumstance. Highly successful people know where they're going, they know where they are, and to get there, they modify their behavior and their response to do what they want to do. And so this technique Tara just taught you, the 4 questions. Is it true? Can you prove it? Is it absolutely true? How do you behave when you believe this? How would you behave if you believe something different? Now allows your mind the opportunity to predict something different. Using NLP and timeline therapy techniques, we can do that really, really, really quickly. Go back, find the root cause of the belief, change the meaning in it for the person to something more productive, and then take it out to the future basically.
You know what's cool is that while we're in quarantine, we all have time to do this.
Are we quarantined? Oh, wait a minute.
Those of us in quarantine.
Sorry, I have to be the other way.
No.
We quarantine differently.
So when life is moving at the pace that it has been moving at, and I understand there's loads of people out there that are still thankfully working, and you know, we can't be more grateful for those people that are still out there working and going probably at an even faster pace.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for those of us who have things have slowed down and we're in, you know, we have this sort of privacy, you do have the opportunity in a way, certainly I found I have and my clients have, to take that moment, right? So when you get the text in the last 2 minutes here, just to bring it back to this world of texting and emailing and stuff, you can take that moment to say, okay, I just, you know, I got this response from somebody and I just immediately made an assumption, right? I felt kicked in the gut, or I felt misunderstood, or, you know, whatever the thing is, that you would previously maybe have allowed yourself just to accept as if it was truth. Now you do actually have that time, that moment to sort of go through this process of, wait a second, is this actually true? So you're assuming that you understand their intention. Is it actually true? Can you prove it? No. How are you responding if it is? And how would you respond differently? Take the time to do that. It's going to become increasingly important as time goes on, that we're doing the best we can to keep ourselves out of jumping to conclusions, out of mind reading, so that we can stay open, so that we can stay present, and so that we can allow ourselves the possibility of staying in a positive mindset, in a positive assumption.
So Tara and I have offered free consultation, 30-minute consultations. Yesterday, some of you took us up on the offer. Sam, what is Sam? Sam keeps us running. So Sam is the keep us running person. Anyway, Sam has posted in the chat side the links to get to Tara and my scheduling software to link a free consultation. Yeah, cool. And she just posted trusty sidekick. There you go. And so if you want a free consultation, if you want to have your meta programs done, as Tara said yesterday, or your VAK, or if there's something that's really bugging you, just hit the link, book a 30-minute session with us. It's complimentary. We'd love to be there for you. We appreciate all you guys joining us on this calm in a COVID storm. And have a really great weekend. Have a really great weekend. Enjoy the time with family that you can. Connect virtually with other people. And we'll see you Monday at 11.